Good afternoon, Pure Potential subscribers, enjoyers, fantasy football enthusiasts. We're here, week 12 almost in the books, just a couple weeks out here from the fantasy playoffs. Got to be honest with you guys, probably the least actionable week of fantasy football production, scoring, whatever. I mean, it makes sense as you get further into the year, like each individual performance is going to mean less and less, but like I don't have a lot of major takeaways from this week that have like really swayed my opinion one way or the other. Mostly just kind of confirming things, I guess, that I already felt, and I don't know what the heck this one hair is doing. But yeah, we'll go through it. We'll still do risers and fallers. We'll do the data drop, all that stuff. But yeah, we're here. Dave is here early today. Paul Cooks, he says, appreciate you, Dave. Happy to see lots of you guys here. Christian, the family is doing well. Everybody's chilling. I'm not personally doing too well after that Eagles game yesterday, but we persevere. Austin is here. Some members in the chat I see. So, yeah, tell us to sell JJ McCarthy for any third. Not quite. We're not quite there yet with McCarthy. I mean, certainly things are looking pretty rough for JJ. Definitely going to be on the fallers list, and we'll just have to kind of try to make sense of what to do with him in Dynasty, if anything. But yeah, I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm going to try to get through my stuff quickly and leave a little bit of extra time for some trade questions, because I know deadlines are coming up for people. Some of you might have deadlines tonight, so I'll try to leave more time for trade questions if you want to hang out until after we get done with the fallers. And I'll try to take as many questions as I can, because honestly, like I said, looking through this slate of games, I didn't have a ton of like huge takeaways, and you guys might have questions about guys that I haven't had a chance to look at super closely, or just didn't come to mind for me in my quick look through this afternoon. So yeah, I see some questions flooding in. I'm going to try to get to a couple of them, and then we're not doing the any second list this week. I just didn't see a lot of great names that I thought would make sense. I didn't want to force anybody. So I'll mention some guys that I might be selling, when we get to the faller section, but I'm going to skip that for today. And some of these questions I'll get to as we get to the risers and fallers, so I'm not going to jump the gun too much. I will say, certainly taking Trevor Lawrence over JJ McCarthy. Say what you will about Trevor Lawrence. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he's got a huge contract, and he's going to be a starter next year. For me, that's not very close at all. I would much rather have Lawrence. I mean, McCarthy is trending towards an Anthony Richardson, Josh Rosen type of career. So if you can still make that swap, somebody's still a big believer, that's definitely something that I would do. All right. So we're going to jump into the data drop here. Valen, I would take London over Rice on a rebuilder, but I have them like back to back. All right. So let's see here. We're going to jump into the data drop first. Just some interesting tweets, data that have been compiled by some of the most insightful analysts out there. And just, this is really helpful for me when I don't have time to dig into all of the data myself, like right away on Monday. That these accounts like Datarama, JJ Zacharyson, Ryan Heath, Jacob Gibbs, these guys are immediately, in the spreadsheets, they're in the fantasy points data suite, they're whatever, and they're finding the interesting information and they're putting it in a visual format. So I love, I'd recommend following any of these accounts that you see here on this segment. And I definitely appreciate their work. Just to give some quick context. And we have to talk about Michael Wilson, right? He's got these 2 back-to-back insane performances after being like, obviously I'm not saying his on-field play, he was bad, but like his advanced metrics, right? His peripherals, what we typically look at, yards per out run, targets per out run, that we find the most predictive of fantasy wide receiver performance, he was downright bad in those metrics. Not even like, oh, he's just an average receiver, he's a slightly below average wide receiver, like under 1 yards per route run, right? Like not earning targets, not doing anything. And you can say it's all Kyler, but we just don't see players like that suddenly come out of the woodwork and put these types of performances up. So this is very unique. But over the past 2 weeks, he's averaging 16 targets per game, 12.5 receptions per game, 150 receiving yards per game, 38.6% first read target share, 3.19 yards per out run. So the context here, just some quick context, the Cardinals are obviously throwing the ball a ton. Their run game sucks. They're in these shootout games. They were behind big against the Niners. They were back and forth against the Jaguars. And they've had 2 very soft matchups where the Niners defense has been absolutely decimated. That there's just no pass rush at all. And then the Jaguars, I think, have the 3rd fewest sacks this year. They're like easily top 10 in yards, passing yards per game allowed. So these are softer matchups, but regardless of what the matchup is, you can't ignore this type of a back-to-back performance. It seems like it's just a perfect storm right now where Jacoby Brissett is kind of doing a bit of a Jameis Winston impression where he's just so willing to sling it, to hang in the pocket. He's converting so many of his dropbacks into pass attempts. And then Michael Wilson, maybe because of the Marv injury, the team kind of went back to the drawing board. They're like, we have no wide receivers. How can we deploy the players that we have effectively? And they've found something here with Wilson. I'm not entirely sure what to do with him in Dynasty because, again, we have 2 games of him being really good and a bunch of sample of him being pretty irrelevant. We know Marvin Harrison will be back soon, probably next week, from this appendicitis thing. Obviously, Marvin Harrison has not been a massive target earner in his own right, but once he's back, he's going to get work. That some of that is coming obviously from Michael Wilson. The question is how much of this is just a moment in time that's going to go away versus how much of this is they've legitimately found something here in Wilson. I will say I'm confident that, as confident as you can be, that we're not witnessing some sort of Puka Nacua, emergence out of nowhere. He has like genuine limitations to his game. Like he can only do some things well. He doesn't really have much juice. He doesn't have vertical. He's not going to separate much vertically. Like he can run, there's certain routes he can run really well. He can play physical. Matt Harmon had a good write-up on him after his game in week 11, basically talking about like, these are some skills that he has had and he's improved on, but then these are things that he's not good against zone coverage. Just a lot of different things where I think he is pretty limited, but he has to move up from me. I'm moving him up into the late second tier this week, just as kind of a hedge. Like, hey, we've seen some cool stuff. I don't want to just sell him for absolutely nothing, but I also don't have the ton of faith in this 25-year-old year 3 wide receiver who, has no quarterback in the future and is going to be sharing the field with Marvin Harrison and McBride. So that's where I'm at. I put him on the any second list last week. I still feel fine about that. Obviously, if you sold him for a second and you're watching the production and you could have used that production, that's a bummer. I think long term, I'd still rather just have a second round pick. I think that's a bit of a better asset to hold. But yeah, hats off to Michael Wilson. It's awesome that he's been able to put these games together. The other thing here on this slide, we have the Pickens versus Lamb over the last several weeks. And this has been really, really interesting to watch. Week 7 on, we get Lamb back from the ankle injury. We have Lamb with a 26.6% target share. He's at 82 yards per game. Only 8.8% first downs per route run, and only 13.4 fantasy points per game. Pickens, on the other hand, slightly lower share of targets, 24.3, but higher receiving yards per game, nearly double, or it is double the first downs per out run, 3 more fantasy points per game. So what is going on? Is Pickens more valuable than Lamb in Dynasty? I think Pickens has probably been I'd say probably my worst call on the season. I did have him as a sell. I put him on the thumbnail of a video back when Lamb was out. And basically my take was, what we're seeing from Pickens is awesome. I don't see how it's going to continue when Lamb comes back. And I just underestimated him as a player. I think he's made some serious strides in like the short passing game and after the catch. I mean, he's just been so good in all phases. And I definitely sold him short there. And also this offense has just been, I think they're second in points per game. So there's enough to go around for both of these guys. And Pickens has legitimately played like a top 10 wide receiver. I am not moving Pickens ahead of Lamb. I just think it's too small of a sample. We have this incredibly long track record of Lamb being awesome. He's still getting a higher share of targets. He has this weird spell of drops recently. And also don't think we should ignore that he suffered a high ankle sprain in season. Like that's something we used to look at as kind of a full season injury. And he came back very quickly from it. But I still believe in Lamb as the overall better player, the overall better dynasty asset. That being said, they've moved closer and closer as the weeks have gone on. So just for reference, I now have George Pickens as my dynasty wide receiver 12. I have CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver 6. I have Lamb just ahead of Jefferson. Jefferson with the problems with JJ McCarthy. It's just so hard to know when he's going to be very reliable again. But then between the two, I have McMillan and Egbuka, Rice, and London. So, for me, I'm going to need to see a little bit more from Pickens. And specifically, I think I would need to see a contract extension for me to move him any higher. McMillan and Egbuka as rookie wide receivers doing what they're doing are so insulated long term. And then Rice, obviously, he's giving you the 20 points per game. He's tied to Mahomes. And then London has just been so good for so long. He's got the track record. So Pickens at 12 for me, just ahead of Nico. I think that's a very fair ranking for him. And I don't want to go so overboard and overcorrect, because how stupid would we feel, right, if we flip these two and then it's Lamb putting up 20 points per game in the fantasy playoffs? Like, it would be so unsurprising if that was going to happen. So, yeah, so that's where I'm at with these two guys. Pickens, obviously a riser. I feel pretty dumb about the call on him as a sell. I think it was just a little bit too cute. Looking at the schedule, looking at, I don't usually fall for the whole too much target competition thing. And obviously that's not been a problem. And obviously he's a much, much better player than Jake Ferguson. So I don't know why it wouldn't be obvious that Ferguson's the guy that's going to get phased out. That was just kind of dumb on my part, but trying to get that corrected. Looking at the second data drop here, I have a couple more things to look at. I'll try to be quicker. We have a little note here from JJ Zacharyson about the Patriots backfield, that Henderson's still the bell cow. Okay. He played 46 snaps versus 22 for Ramondre in Ramondre's first game back. Henderson ran 22 routes versus 9 for Stevenson. He had a 72% running back rush share and 12% target share. I wish I had pulled up for reference other running backs around the league in case you don't have a reference, but 72% running back rush share and 12% target share. That is a very, very strong workload, like for any running back. That is not something that's not a guy you would classify as a committee back. Typically you would consider that a workhorse, a bell cow. That's what he was. It was a pretty lackluster day for the Patriots offense overall. And honestly, those goal line series, it made me sick to my stomach. I don't know what the heck they were doing, getting up to the one and then like letting Henderson run and then calling a timeout, putting in Terrell Jennings, then taking him out, putting in Stevenson, and then getting a new first down, running Stevenson again. I mean, Stevenson was so ineffective in this game. It was unbelievable, but I was pretty encouraged overall with the split. Maybe you can say Ramondre's getting ramped up. He's going to increase his workload. I don't see it that way. I think what we're looking at is the new normal, which is that for the most part, Henderson is just the preferred back in every situation. And he had 4 carries on the first drive. He had 2 targets at the beginning of the second drive. He was just the clear starter and the clear lead throughout. So Henderson truthers, it's been a long road, but I think we won. And I'm hopeful that we'll see some better performances down the stretch here. Again, just an off day for the whole offense. Diggs was bad. May was up and down. He finally locked in later on in the game, but yeah, better days ahead. Weird that it came against the Bengals defense, but the NFL never really makes any sense. Max, I didn't talk about McCarthy yet. He's going to be in the Fallers section. I will definitely get there, but he's pretty dead. All right. Last thing in the data drop. This is from Ryan Heath. I thought this was pretty interesting. Chip Kelly was fired, so offensive coordinator for the Raiders is out. Greg Olson, not the announcer, different Greg Olson, is now the offensive coordinator. He's been with the Raiders before. He's calling the plays. Last time he did that, you can see here, 2018 to 2021, we had Jared Cook leading the team with 101 targets. We had Darren Waller, first year at tight end with 117. Then we had 2020. That was the biggest Darren Waller year. He had 145 targets, and then he had 8.5 targets per game in 2021 prior to getting injured. So just maybe a little bit of hope that this offense can maybe find its footing a little bit and can do that by funneling the ball to Brock Bowers in all situations, which is really, what the team should be doing because he's so far and away better than every other weapon they have. It's obviously been disappointing to have Bowers with the injury and then how bad the offense has been, but there's really nowhere to go but up. And even with the offense being bad, it's not like he's been totally unusable in tight end premium formats. He still gave you the one massive game. I think he had 16 or 17 tight end premium points yesterday. So it's been disappointing. I'm hoping that there are better days ahead for this offense. Nothing incredible, but yeah, maybe he can give us some spike weeks. So Tatum asked, would you trade McBride for Bowers? And if so, is there a plus on the Bowers side? So I've been trying to adjust this. I think it's really hard to discount what McBride has been doing. And so I'm not trying to take away from that at all. And if you have McBride as your tight end 1 in Dynasty, I've got no issue with that. I have moved them to back-to-back in my rankings. I still have Bowers 1 spot ahead. Feel free to call that stubbornness. Obviously, with the way current situations are, it's clearly McBride that is putting up more fantasy points. I just think Bowers is such a special player in terms of what he is capable of doing at his ceiling. And this situation is just so far from that. He's an insanely young player. He's just very unique. So the way that I feel, if I have Bowers, I'm not trading him for McBride, but I also don't think if you have McBride, you need to feel obligated to trade him for Bowers. Like I said, I have them back to back. I want to have exposure to both guys, right? I play in a lot of dynasty leagues. I wouldn't be happy if I had all Trey McBride and no Bowers and vice versa. So, I understand giving the nod to McBride in a super win now situation. We don't know who McBride's quarterback is going to be next year. We obviously don't know that for Bowers either. I just think in a vacuum, as a receiver, Bowers is a little bit higher upside as a receiver. And it's hard to say higher upside than what McBride's been doing. It's just, I'm talking I think prime Kelsey production is in the range of outcomes for Bowers. If we were to just see this situation improve, and maybe that's a massive if, because the Raiders are a pretty poor organization and we have no idea, if and when that's coming. So I guess that's a whole lot of words to say, pick your favorite. I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer. Maverick, I see you there in the chat. I'm glad you can make a stream as well. The more the merrier. Let's go ahead and get into the risers and fallers. Like I said, I wanted to try to finish this part early to leave a lot of time at the end for questions. So risers and fallers, we'll start with risers as always. And like I said, this isn't a super actionable week. Some of the names on this list are not really moving much in my rankings. It's just sort of highlighting some of the notable big performances so that I have a chance to comment on them and kind of give you a clear outlook moving forward for these guys. Starting with Jackson Smith-Njigba, I had to put him on the list for the risers here because I did move him from Dynasty wide receiver 2 to Dynasty wide receiver 1 after this past game. There's just nothing else this guy can do to show that he is, arguably the best, certainly one of the best wide receivers in the league. He does it in every single way. He does it with the highest target share. He wins deep. He wins short. He does everything. He's younger than Jamar Chase. I don't know what we're supposed to do if he's not at the top of the list. So, JSN, congratulations. Puka's reign at the top was short-lived. You are now the Dynasty wide receiver 1. There's nothing actionable here. You're not getting JSN from a team that has him. He will just continue to always and forever be the biggest L I've ever taken in fantasy football. And that's okay. Maybe I'll get a share someday. Maybe I'll draft him in a startup. Blake Jackson asks about CeeDee Lamb. I talked about CeeDee Lamb back earlier in the stream. We talked about Pickens versus Lamb. I moved him down a little bit. I'm not really that concerned overall. I'd be willing to buy low on Lamb. All right. Let me take a look at Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, not really a guy that's moving much for me. We all knew Jahmyr Gibbs was awesome. I just decided to put him on here because he scored 55 fantasy points and it was absolutely insane. I thought I had already put him at running back 1, and I guess I forgot to. I had him right behind Bijan Robinson, but I definitely meant to move him ahead a couple of weeks ago. I did officially go ahead and do that. So welcome to Dynasty running back 1, Jahmyr Gibbs. If you haven't been paying attention, over the last 2 weeks, we have seen Gibbs get his biggest percentage-wise workloads in the backfield in games that Montgomery has been healthy. So Gibbs has fully taken over this backfield from Montgomery. David Montgomery is now playing, just a complementary role, and it's easy to see why. It's always been the case that Jahmyr Gibbs is just so much better, and that's not even a knock on Montgomery, who's a totally fine player. Gibbs is arguably the best running back in the NFL. You can totally say Jonathan Taylor. If it's not Jonathan Taylor, it is Jahmyr Gibbs. He is unbelievable with the football in his hands. He's super young. He's been getting high target shares, which is not something we saw a lot last year. And he's the GOAT. He's a top 10 overall dynasty asset very easily for me. I think he's 7 in my rankings. So, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is awesome. Then we have Pickens. I already talked about him, but I might as well answer this question from one of our members, Doug Bug Official. What would Pickens have to do to overtake London and Rice at this point? I think it would be hard for me to get there. If he was to sign a multi-year extension with the Cowboys, that would certainly help. That should be a foregone conclusion for a young wide receiver like him doing what he's doing, but the Cowboys have been so weird with paying players and contract negotiations and stuff over the years that I'm not really willing to take it for granted. If he was to sign that extension, that would go a long way. It would probably get him into the tier at least. And then, it would depend on the other guys, right? Who is Drake London's quarterback next year, right? That matters. What can Rashee Rice do the rest of the way? I don't think Rice has done anything to get knocked down. He's averaging 20 points per game since he came back. He obviously has an elite quarterback as well. Is Pickens a better talent than him? Yeah, I certainly think so. But Rice is in a very fantasy-friendly environment. He has a very fantasy-friendly role. I don't know how soon that's going to change. So I think he jumps into that tier as soon as he gets an extension. And then from there, we just kind of see. All right. Cam Ward finally looked sort of like the number 1 overall pick. I should have pulled up his stat line. Let me do that real quick. Cam Ward, was like a top 5 fantasy quarterback this week. He had 256 passing yards and a touchdown, no interceptions, 66.7% completion percentage. He actually hasn't thrown a pick in 3 games, which is encouraging because he threw one in 6 straight games before that. 91 passer rating. I mean, he had a solid game, and watching it looked pretty impressive, especially when you consider the cast of characters that he was working with. Calvin Ridley's out for the year. Alec Ayomanor was out. It was Chim DK and Gunnar Helm, and I can't even think of who their other wide receivers were on the team. So, and against the Seahawks defense, who has been very good this year. Impressive from Cam Ward. Maybe we're starting to see him turn a corner a little bit. I have never been like the expert film evaluator for quarterbacks, but I've heard some players or analysts talking about how he shows flashes. He looks better on tape than the box score would indicate. Maybe that's true. I think he's hanging out in that late first value range for me. He's going to get some grace because of how bad the supporting cast has been. And if he can stack up, a couple more performances like this that show some flashes, get people excited, he's easily going to have hype going into next year if this team can just make any improvements, bring in a marquee wide receiver, make some offensive line improvements, hire an exciting head coach. Like, there's a lot of things that they could do that would get people excited about Cam Ward potentially breaking out. So I don't hate him as a dynasty investment and potentially a guy you can still buy pretty low on. Jaden Higgins also kind of began his breakout a little bit on Thursday Night Football. He ran 68% of the routes. That was the highest percentage in a game with Nico Collins this year. He ended up he didn't have the biggest stat line because he had a lot of incompletions, and some of them were like really close where he had a toe out. He only ended up with 4 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown, but he had 9 targets. And just watching, it was like he was so clearly the second guy with Nico Collins. Now, Higgins is interesting because he didn't grade out super well in Matt Harmon's midseason rookie report. So as far as the route running and the success rate versus man and zone coverage, neither was super impressive for Matt. And obviously he hasn't gotten on the field a whole lot until recently, but this guy was a very, very early second-round pick. He is starting to show some signs of life. He has at least 4 catches in 3 straight games. He's got 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. There's something here with Higgins. He's going to continue to flash a little bit, I think. So just a player that's trending up and someone you might want to try to get in on the ground floor, because when you're looking at these rookie wide receivers, there's so much thirst for wide receiver talent that they can blow up so quickly. So just a guy to keep an eye on, guy to potentially try to add if you can, at a reasonable cost. I'm not suggesting doing anything crazy, but he's been hanging out around second round pick value. And I would happily send, a future second for Jaden Higgins to take a shot on him. Morgan Palmer. I've seen John Mechie brought up several times. Oh, it's the same person that keeps bringing up John Mechie. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't really have much interest in John Mechie. Like, maybe this is some super delayed breakout because of the medical issues he had earlier in his career, but he's like, is this his 4th season in the league, 3rd or 4th season? He's playing on a Jets team. Like, the only active pass catchers are Adonai Mitchell and Mason Taylor, and they're trailing tremendously in every game. I don't know if there's really anything here with John Mechie. Certainly, if he's on waivers, there's no harm in picking him up. But I don't really think we're watching anything too noteworthy happen with Mechie. All right, our next riser is Christian Watson, player who kind of shocked me with how quickly he was able to come back from the ACL tear he suffered last year, like really late in the season, week 17, I think. Since returning from injury, JJ Zacharyson notes his target shares, 11.4%, 11.4%, 14%, 20%, 33%. So 33% target share in week 12. Jacob Gibbs also adds 91% route rate, 40% first read target share. So he's playing full time. Now, the caveat here is that Matthew Golden was out. Jaden Reed is still out. Tucker Kraft is out. There's not a lot of men left standing for this Packers receiving room. So I don't know that we're witnessing like a truly dominant ascension here from Watson, or if it's just kind of by default. I will say Romeo Doubs has very much gone back in the bottle after having a couple of decent games early in the year. I think Watson's the best wide receiver the Packers have right now, and I think he's at least flex worthy. He's in that like wide receiver 4 range every week. And that's better than where he was valued in the offseason. So he's been a riser for sure. I just moved him up into the late 2 tier. I'd rather have him than Dobbs. I'd rather have him than Rashid Shaheed. I'd probably rather have him than Michael Wilson, but it's close. So yeah, I would take him over Wilson. Just better passing game, better pedigree. We have more of like past success on his resume. So yeah, just a guy to watch. Like, could be a contributor here later in the season. We'll see about Jaden Reed. We'll see about Matthew Golden, but he's been performing. I mean, he's been efficient per route. Efficient per route. When Reed comes back, Reed or Watson. So I still have Reed higher in Dynasty, and I don't really know if that's correct or not, because Reed has really only been an 11 personnel piece. But that being said, the Packers are going to run almost exclusively 11 personnel the rest of the season, I think, because Tucker Kraft is out. And so they're not really going to want to do 2 tight end sets with Luke Musgrave and John Fitzpatrick very often when they can get Reed on the field, I think. So the 11 personnel only designation for Reed might not matter that much. I do think he is overall the most talented of their wide receivers. So I'll say Reed, but I don't feel super good about any of them. We have to do Tyrone Tracy as well. Not a great box score for him. He had a pretty inefficient day on the ground. He had like a ton of carries for no yards. Tyrone Tracy, 20 carries for 62 yards. He did catch 3 passes, no touchdowns for Tracy, but he did start to distance himself more from Singletary. He had more than double his snaps, 58 to 25, 71% snap share. That is relevant. If he's going to lap him like that every week, he's going to be a more reliable starting option, you know, in that back end RB2 conversation the rest of the way. I still don't have a lot of interest in him long term. So if you're not using him, I'll gladly trade him for a second, but he can fill that RB2 spot for you or fill a flex spot for you the rest of the way if this is going to hold. And it probably should. I mean, I think he's a better player than Singletary. Another another stat that is not relevant at all, I just think it's really, really funny, is that Jameis Winston currently leads the NFL in yards per route run. So absolute GOAT, Jameis Winston. That was probably my favorite play of the entire season. I actually started laughing out loud at my TV at that play because it was just so unbelievable and hilarious that Jameis Winston caught that pass in the first place and then was able to juke out the guy, because he's not an athlete. He is not a very athletic quarterback, but that was really impressive. All right, last player on this list is technically a riser, Shedeur Sanders. I am not sold, to be honest. I would be tempted to sell after this performance. Now, I will say Kevin Stefanski has already confirmed that Shedeur is going to start this Sunday against the 49ers, even though Dylan Gabriel has cleared concussion protocol. So I think the rest of the way, Sanders is just now ahead of Gabriel, which isn't that surprising. Gabriel was not very good in his starts. I still have a very, very low confidence level that this is something that extends beyond this season. I don't even know if it does extend the full season, because I think there's some percent chance that Deshaun Watson can come back and he could be the starter. I watched back the game. You know, he had a moment or two. The deep shot to Isaiah Bond was pretty impressive. I didn't see much else that was like anything too great. He mostly threw screens or something. Short passes, screen passes, the Dylan Sampson touchdown, obviously he didn't have to do a whole lot there. Yeah, I mean, it's a rookie quarterback in his first start, so I'm not saying like he was supposed to light the world on fire. They got the win. That's great. Big picture, we're talking about a 5th round pick. We're talking about a team that's going to have a very early draft pick and a team that he's not necessarily set up to succeed on, right? This offense is still not going to be good. So I think the move, not that I have a lot of shares, I think the move is let him play out this week against the 49ers. Their defense is really, really bad, and he might be able to put up a decent stat line against the 49ers based on what they've done recently. And at that point, I'd start shopping and seeing what you can get, because I think if he has a decent game, there are people that are going to offer you early 2nd round picks. I'm going to take that happily and run with it. I get that there are truthers out there. I'm not among them. So he's a riser. Like, he was in the late 3rd round pick tier for me. He's going to go above that, but I'm not super sold on him as a long-term player. Again, the 5th round draft capital, and I don't agree with this at all. I don't subscribe to the conspiracy theory stuff at all. I know plenty of analysts, in fact, the majority that I respect, did not think Sanders was anywhere close to a 1st round level talent prospect. I think people have it. I don't have like a super strong take because I don't scout quarterback. So I'm not trying to say one way or the other, but I think it's very possible that we have it backwards. The people that think he was talked about, he was clearly meant to be a 1st round pick and then he went late. I think it's possible he was talked up as a 1st round pick, and the hype, it was more of a hype machine than it ever was like the production on the field was screaming 1st round pick. And then he ended up going where the NFL actually viewed him. We're never going to know one way or the other, but no, I'm not going to exempt him from the draft capital. I think if he was so much better than a 5th round pick, then he would have started for the Browns a while ago. I don't know why everybody in the Browns organization wants to win games. If they really, really thought that he was the best way to win games, why would they have played Dylan Gabriel for so long? Like, I don't think that there's some conspiracy inside of the Browns organization trying to keep him on the bench when, if he was by far their best quarterback. I don't believe that. So we'll see. He could totally prove me wrong and be awesome. I'm playing a game of probabilities here. I don't have a lot of faith in a 5th round pick quarterback who's coming in to fill in for a really bad offense late in the season on a team that's going to have a top 5 draft pick. That's just my 2 cents. Let's go over to the Faller side, though. Fallers here, starting with Rome Odunze. It's been such a weird year for Odunze because he started out so strong that I was forced to like back off all of my takes about Odunze from the offseason, where I said I didn't think that his rookie season was indicative of a guy that was going to be a star wide receiver in the league. He came out, looked like a star early in the season. He has not looked like a star in a long time. And I was shocked to find this out today. He is averaging 0.5 points per game more than Marvin Harrison through the season. He is now a 13 points per game wide receiver. That's like mid to low end wide receiver 2, which is pretty much exactly what I thought he was going to be. 15.4 expected points per game. So the usage has been a little better than the results. Some of that's his fault. He's had some drops. Some of that is, inaccuracy, whatever. In the end, Rome Odunze is starting to look like more of a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And he's kind of been moving gradually back down towards where I had him preseason as he's kind of shown us this. And this is corresponding with increased roles for Colston Loveland, for Luther Burden. Right now, there's nobody on this team that is like a set it and forget it, locked in star every week. You should start Odunze You can start DJ Moore. You can start Luther Burden. You can start Colson Loveland. He can still improve. So like I have him ahead of, like the Jordan Addison tier of wide receivers. I still have him above that because he can keep improving. He's a young player, but he's not there yet. He's not a wide receiver one in fantasy yet. And I am a little bit more skeptical of that type of ascension because I'm a believer in Loveland and Burden. Like you look at the Seattle offense, obviously JSN is fantastic. Would he have a 34% target share if there were two other young, talented pass catchers there? If his competition wasn't Cooper Kupp and Rashid Shaheed, who got on the team 3 weeks ago, and AJ Barner, he probably would have a lower share than that. He would still be awesome. But I don't know if we're going to see that type of ascension from Rome. So he's a faller for me. I'm being asked about Marvin Harrison. I was already talking with Mission in the members Discord about this. No, I wouldn't roll the dice on Marvin Harrison because I just think that Rome Odunze is better. And I don't know where the Cardinals are getting a massive upgrade at quarterback next year, and I don't know who their coach is going to be, and their offensive line's not good. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with Rome over Marv pretty comfortably for now. Another faller is Baker Mayfield. Before we get to that, I do want to address this right here. Rookies don't always get the jump day one. Oh, I think this was a response to Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah, Austin is trolling here. I know for a fact he's one of the members, and he's doing a bit here. Why did Henderson stay the backup versus Sanders? Not that he cares because I know what he thinks, but I think the difference would be that there's a veteran versus a rookie as opposed to a rookie versus a rookie. There's no reason to show deference to Gabriel when they're both rookies. All right, Baker Mayfield. Oh, well, we have a Bears logo here saying that Rome's not a faller. I mean, this is a dynasty show. Like he's falling in dynasty rankings because people thought he was going to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, and he's not. So yeah, he has to be a faller. Like you can't just score 10 points per game for a month and a half and just not fall in value. He's less valuable now. He's a good player. He can still have good games, but yeah, he's a faller. He's moving down in my rankings. We got a super chat here from Chris. Appreciate you. Trade Gadsden in 2/3 for Travis Hunter. I don't think you need to do that. I mean, well, sorry. It depends on the league settings for me. If it's a tight end premium league, I don't think you need to do that. And I would assume it is. I don't know who's that excited about Gadsden in non-tight end premium, but in a non-tight end premium, I would make that move to get Hunter. In my rankings, which are tight end premium, I have them very close together. I don't think you need to move picks to get from one to the other. And if you're a rebuilder, you want to keep the picks, take more shots on rookies. If you're a contender, you obviously would rather have Gadsden scoring points right now. So I think you can pass on that deal. All right. Appreciate you, Luke. I'm trying to follow what the Bears fan is saying here, and I just don't understand what he's saying. He got to have development with Caleb. He barely gets targets, which is fine. I mean, he's leading the team in targets, and they've been playing together for over a year and a half now. I think you might not have the most objective lens of how your offense functions or who scores fantasy points. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the game against the Eagles. Not a super great matchup for him, if we're being honest. But it'll be interesting. All right. Next faller is Jameson Williams. And honestly, I'm using faller very loosely here because where I had Jameson Williams ranked, he's not moving much after this game. But I will say I was getting some questions about my ranking of Jameson Williams. Like, don't you know Sam Laporte is out and he's going to run away with the job? Not the job, but like the increased opportunity. And he's on a breakout path right now. Like he's going to be a league winner. This is Jameson Williams, guys. This is what he is. He has some good games and then he does nothing. Like he's not a consistent wide receiver. He's not an all-around star wide receiver. He had 3 targets in this game. He caught 0 points. He's he has not graduated to that next level. Oh, I didn't talk about Baker Mayfield. You guys are so right. I'll go back. He hasn't graduated to that next level. He's right on that like late 1, early 2 fringe. He's a player that I will always and forever trade away for a first round pick if I get the option. In fact, I did that in the one league that I had him. He had one big game, and I traded him with Mark Andrews for a 2027 or 2026 first round pick. I think it'll be probably 108, 109 range, and that's more than enough for me. But yeah, I skipped over Baker. I got distracted. Baker Mayfield suffered an AC sprain of some kind. I don't know how severe. They said there was some chance he could play this coming week. If he misses time, it'll probably be 1 to 2 games at most. I'm not really putting him as a faller just because of that. I'm just putting him as a faller because he just hasn't delivered. He's played genuinely poor football over the last month, and I think he's been banged up. Obviously, his weapons have been banged up. We've had Bucky out for a while. Evans has been out. Godwin's been out. It's not like he's been in the most favorable circumstance. But I think we are seeing some of that regression coming from Baker that, last year the touchdown rate was insane. He just seemed to have lightning in a bottle. And he came out the beginning of this year, and there was some of that. But it has not been there recently. He's been overthrowing Egbuka, missing on potential plays. Like he's just not playing well. And so, that paired with the injury, like I think he needs to be moved down a little bit from where the consensus seems to value him, which is so high. So high. It seems like he's valued really, really high by the consensus. And I don't think he needs to be viewed as I have him at quarterback 14. I think I'm moving him behind Dak. Okay, here we go. We had a Bears fan talking about Rome. Now we have an Emeka Egbuka username here telling me that Baker's whole offense is hurt. His whole offense isn't hurt. He has Emeka Egbuka. His running backs are totally serviceable. I believe Tristan Wirfs is healthy and playing. I don't think his entire offense is hurt. I think he has just not played very well recently. Not saying he's a bad quarterback or anything. From a fantasy lens, when a 30-something-year-old quarterback is hurt and playing bad, they hold a little bit less value. I don't think that we're getting a top 8 type of fantasy performance from Baker, which is what I think people were hoping for when they valued him as highly as they did. Like, I can't see any reason to prefer Baker to Dak Prescott in Dynasty, which is, I think, he's being pretty consistently valued ahead of. And I just don't think that needs to be the case. I'm definitely not moving Egbuka down. He's a rookie. The stretch of production doesn't really impact anything. Like, he's been missed on these big plays. He's still getting peppered with targets. He has elite marks in terms of success rate versus man and zone coverage. He's an amazing player. I'm not really worried about him at all. And unlike Baker, he's still in the part of his career where his value is on an upward trajectory. Like he has a ton of grace ahead of him. He doesn't need to produce immediately to hold immense value. When you're on the opposite side of 30, you have to hold value by producing. And when you don't produce, you lose value. It's just how it is. And I don't understand the comment about Jameson Williams. He'll be perfectly fine. Not good to react over one dud game. Jameson Williams has only had dud games this year outside of like 2 performances. Like, does perfectly fine mean like 1 great game and 2 good games out of every 12 games that he has? Because if so, then he just needs to be valued lower. Like he hasn't been good this year at all. He had a couple good games leading up to this. And before that, he was doing absolutely nothing the whole season. So it's not 1 dud game. It's a bunch of dud games. But anyway, let's move on. Zebediah, I'm taking Brock Purdy pretty comfortably. I'm taking Purdy pretty comfortably over Baker in Dynasty. And I had that way before this, just to be clear. All right. A Zelda fan. I do find it interesting to be putting injured guys on the fallers list. Yeah, I mean, the label of being a faller is not, it doesn't automatically brand that player as bad. these are dynasty risers and fallers. You gain value and you lose value. When you get hurt and you don't score points, you lose value. I'm not blaming players for getting hurt. I'm not saying, like, Malik Neighbors is an amazing football player. He was on the fallers list when he tore his ACL because he lost value. He lost an entire season of production, and people need production to win fantasy championships. So he's a faller. I'm not saying he's bad. I think Josh Downs is a great player, and he's on this list because he's not on the field. So it is what it is. Some of these players are fallers because of underperformance. Some are fallers because of injury. Sometimes it's roles changing. There's a lot of reasons why players are fallers, but at the end of the day, this is a dynasty fantasy football show. I have to evaluate from a dynasty lens. When players get hurt, they lose value. In the case of Josh Downs, he's not hurt. He's just not playing. And I personally don't agree with it. Like, I think he's a very good route runner. He just isn't fitting in well with what the Colts want to do right now. He ran a 42% route share in week 12. That was the lowest of the year. Alec Pierce is playing really well. Pittman is playing well. Those guys are your 2 wide receiver set players. Warren is an every down player. There's just not enough. Downs is getting squeezed here in the offense, and it is what it is. I think he has a high ceiling in the right circumstances. That's not in this offense. So he's moving down for me a little bit. He's down into kind of more the mid-second range for me. He could leave the team at some point. He's still pretty young. Things could change if there's injury. Like when you have a player that is talented like this and is being suppressed by a situation or a role, I still want to leave the light on for that guy. But if you can mobilize his value to get something useful because someone else wants to hold him and hope for the best, I'm not opposed to that at all. Because you can't really play him. He's not really startable right now. JJ McCarthy is a faller, obviously. This is pretty obvious. He's having one of the worst starts to a career that you can ever have. And I guess we just have to cue the Vikings fans showing up in the chat to say it's actually not his fault. The offensive line's bad and he's doing everything he can out there or something. He's not. Unlike some of these other guys where I acknowledge the talent and the circumstances, McCarthy's just simply not getting it done. He started 5 games. I'm not saying his career is over, but I think any rational actor at this point would have to say it's more likely that JJ McCarthy is a bust and a flop in the NFL than he is a star quarterback. Like, that's just, if you're being objective, like it's one of the worst starts we've ever seen for a quarterback, bar none. So he looks completely lost out there. It's unbelievable. He has been diagnosed with a concussion. Max Brosmer is probably going to start next week. I don't know if this is a Brock Purdy situation where he takes over the job and doesn't give it back. I assume Max Brosmer is also terrible, and the team has invested enough in McCarthy that I don't think he's going to get 5 career starts and be done. I think he will play again. But yeah, he's a faller. If you can get early second value still from a McCarthy truther, I'm absolutely taking that. Based on where I have him ranked, some players I would rather have would be Jaden Higgins, Woody Marks, Stephon Diggs, Troy Franklin, Dalton Kincaid, Jalen Warren. That's where we're at. Travis Etienne, I would probably take like Trey Benson. I think Bryce Young is a legitimate question. Like, I'd probably take Bryce Young. It's close. It's close. I don't know. I don't know if I would. I'm not a big Bryce Young fan either, but yeah, it's pretty bad. So he's a faller for sure. If you have him and you can't get anything for him in your league, you just kind of have to hope for the best. Certainly you want to get Max Brosmer on your team so you can at least have 2 quarterbacks that don't amount to anything instead of 1. But all right. DeAndre Swift is a faller. This was interesting to me. Let me see if I can find the stat. Week 12, we saw Kyle Monangai with a 60% rush share versus Swift at 40%. Monangai got 2/3 of the inside the 10 rushes and ran about the same number of routes as Swift. Now, I think Swift had a fumble in this game, and that was where we really saw a turn. But the thing about DeAndre Swift is he's not talented enough to get away with fumbling. Now, Kyron Williams gets away with it. Ramondre did get away with it until he hurt his toe. Swift is simply not notably better than Kyle Monangai. So if the team decides they'd rather trot Monangai out there, there's no guarantees that Swift regains this foothold. So I think this is sort of a beginning of a downtrend. He might have a good game or two because they do run the ball a good bit. There's a lot of expected points to go around for backs on this team, but if you can still get a second round pick for Swift, I'd be pretty inclined to take it. And they do have a really bad schedule for fantasy running backs as well down the stretch. So I think we're starting to maybe see the beginning of the end for Swift. I don't know for sure if he gets another significant chance on another team down the line. I really, really doubt that he remains the Bears' primary running back in 2026. And he's not going to hold a lot of value in the offseason. Nobody's going to want to touch this guy. It's going to be a toxic asset. So if you're not heavily reliant on him right now, I would try to move him. And even if you are, I'm not sure how good the production's going to be. Then we have Rashid Shaheed. I said I was going to try to do this quickly, and then I just didn't. I suck at this. Rashid Shaheed has gotten 8 total targets, I think, in the 3 weeks he's been a Seattle Seahawk. There's no room for a 1B on this team. Like, JSN is the passing game. If there's a 1B, it's AJ Barner. And nobody else is even a consideration to be started. So it's pretty rough for Shaheed. You know, he's a talented player, and I thought he could make some splash plays, and maybe he still will. But I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to get enough volume to be like a true weekly starting option. So I'd be looking into, like, you know, what can you get for him in Dynasty? Because I'm just not I'm not too interested in playing this game with Shaheed on a team that barely throws the ball, and when they do, it's always going to number 11. And then we have Alvin Kamara, and I know, guys, I'm putting an injured player on the Fallers list. Sue me. Alvin Kamara has been pretty awful this year. He just suffered an MCL sprain, probably going to miss at least 2 to 3 weeks. He might just get shut down for the season. I don't really know what the point is of bringing him back in week 16, 17. Just let Devin Neal play it out. I don't know if this is the end of Alvin Kamara's career. He certainly is not what he once was, and it seems like he doesn't want to play on a team other than the Saints. So it's kind of up to the Saints, I guess, whether Alvin Kamara plays in 2026 or not. At this point in Dynasty, I don't know if you're getting an early 3rd round pick, but I'd be pretty content to just start over, I think, with a pick. So, all right. J Money, I appreciate you, dude, with the super chat. Not even a question. He just said T-Mac is him. I agree. I'm hoping for a huge game tonight from Mr. McMillan. He's awesome. I have him ranked wide receiver 10 in Dynasty. Just behind, wide receiver 8 in Dynasty, just behind Justin Jefferson for me. He is an amazing player. Him and Igbuka, both. I think they're neck and neck. I think they could flip back and forth throughout their careers. But they both do some things really, really well. And I think they're kind of the next crop of up and coming elite wide receivers. I hope the Panthers can get a real quarterback someday. But yeah, I'll take 49ers tonight over the Panthers. All right. That's the end of the Fallers list, guys. Thank you for bearing with me while I definitely didn't do that quickly at all. I'll leave some time here for some more questions, topics you want me to cover, players you want me to talk about. I'll get to as much as I can in the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap it up. J Money, appreciate it. I told you to buy T-Mac stock because of how Canales uses X wide receiver. Hey, appreciate you trusting me. I'm going to shout out Ryan Heath for that pull. That was his data. I just passed it along. That's my job here in the Dynasty space, but either way, I appreciate it. Should I trade T. Higgins and a 3rd for Jaden Higgins and an early 1st? Oh my gosh, absolutely you should. Yes. Yes, I would trade T Higgins for an early first, like so easily. Yeah, please do that. I mean, I would trade T Higgins for Jaden Higgins and any first round pick, but certainly top 6 first. Yeah. I didn't do the any second list this week. I just didn't have really good names that I like haven't already covered or that I thought were realistic enough. I would put Rashid Shaheed on it if I could. I would put Romeo Dobbs on it if I made one, I guess. I just didn't think there were like a ton of players that really made a lot of sense. I think TJ Hawkinson maybe is a guy that if you can still get like a 27 second, I would do. Chris Godwin probably makes sense there. But yeah. Let's see. No, I wouldn't consider Wan'Dale Robinson to be on the any second round pick list. What I'll say about Wan'Dale, I think you do have to take the performance yesterday with a little bit of a grain of salt. You're looking at a passing game with basically no viable weapons. Paired with Jameis Winston, who's like the biggest YOLO thrower of all time, always been fantasy gold for his wide receivers. Look at Jerry Jeudy this year versus last year. And then you have this matchup where it's like fast-paced shootout type of game against a pretty banged up defense that's been underperforming all year. Wan'Dale's been good, and I think you could keep him. If I was in a situation where I don't need the production right now, I would sell him for like a random 27 second. You know, if you were going to pass on a late 26 second, like you don't want the 210 for Wan'Dale, I think that's fine. But if you're talking a 27 second that could be mid, you know, you don't really know where it's going to project, I would still take that over him. Any rookie wide receivers besides Hunter that likely won't hit the 525 metric. So I'm actually not familiar with that metric. I just by context, I'm guessing it's 525 receiving yards in your rookie season. I haven't looked into like what the hit rate is on that. And I also don't know what kind of pace we're on with some of these rookies. So I can't really say. I think some rookie wide receivers that may underperform that I'm certainly going to be high on would be Luther Burden. You know, looking at Luther Burden's stats right now, he's got 295 yards on the season. So it's not impossible that over the next 6 weeks, is that how many games are left? 6 games? 6 or 7 games that he could get to that number of receiving yards. I certainly hope he does. But even if he doesn't, I think I'm still going to be pretty in on him. Off the top of my head, you know, I'm intrigued by Jaden Higgins, but that's going to be very much a cost question for me. Like, how does the market view him about whether I want to buy in long term? There's nobody else that I think I'm going to be like super in on. Like, I'm not really into Matthew Golden. Jalen Noel, I guess, is intriguing. But like after that, I don't really care much about Kyle Williams, Trey Harris, Pat Bryant. You know, these guys are interesting dart throws. Nobody I'm going to be making big stands on, I don't think, unless something really changes. Sell or hold DK on a rebuild. I mean, I guess it's not a great time to sell him unless if he's injured right now, but I actually didn't see if that was like a real injury, if he's going to miss any time. I would absolutely want to sell DK Metcalf on a rebuild. I'd want to sell him on any team because I just think he's overvalued. But yeah, on a rebuild, 27, 28-year-old wide receiver who's not very productive, yeah, I would love to get rid of that player. See if you can get an early second. I'd be fine with a second and a third personally. Baker announced to have a low grade sprain. Yeah, so he'll probably play next week. If not, he'll play the week after for sure. All right. Really need a wide receiver buy with injuries to Higgins and London. Anyone I should look at? I mean, I like Wan'Dale Robinson. Just depends what he costs. I like Alec Pierce in like that cheaper wide receiver range. If you want to shop a little higher, maybe you could try to buy Stephon Diggs off a bad game. I still like him. I think Ricky Pearsall is a pretty intriguing buy, but you have about 2 hours to do it. Troy Franklin is interesting to me. Those are some names to look into. If you want to go super cheap, Christian Watson, who I talked about earlier, could be a viable fill-in guy. I'm gonna wrap this thing up here in a minute, guys. Let me just get to a couple more questions. What's a running back to target with a base first that can be helpful this year and in the future? I'd rather not trade like a future year first for a running back right now in that range. There's just too much uncertainty. Like Breece Hall is just not scoring enough right now to really be the difference in winning a championship for you. I think he's in the right value range. It's just not how I would want to spend a pick. If you could get James Cook for that pick, I think that's reasonable. I doubt you will, though. And I don't think you're getting McCaffrey. I don't think you're getting Bucky. I don't think you're getting Henderson. So it's just kind of an awkward trade structure. Like I would much rather trade something less than a first for Rico Dowdle, Derrick Henry, Kenneth Walker, something like that. Even Chase Brown, as opposed to that type of deal with a first. Herbert for Purdy and Ricky. I would keep Herbert there. I'm just too high, like very high on the talent. I would just keep Herbert personally. I think Troy Franklin has really already taken over the wide receiver room in Denver. It's sort of fake in the sense that like there's manufactured touches and he just has like a much easier role than Cortland Sutton, who just has to run routes outside and win. Sutton has the harder job, but like Franklin's been out targeting him almost every single week, and that's what we care about in fantasy. So I do have Franklin valued ahead. He's obviously much younger. He's only 22 years old. It's pretty impressive. I'm always a little bit wary to buy in on a day 3 wide receiver who had a pretty lackluster rookie season, but this looks like at least a somewhat sustainable breakout. I don't think he's a future star, but fantasy friendly role. I don't think it's, I don't know. I was gonna say it's a little bit Wan'Dale Robinson-esque in the sense that like he gets some gimmicky stuff and he's not always asked to do the hard stuff, but he also does operate downfield a bit. So, and he's actually had potential for more productive games if Knicks wouldn't miss him every single time deep. So yeah, I think it's kind of real. All right, guys, last question. Is Neighbors worth 2 2027 first if you have no other picks until 2028? Very hard to answer that question without context. I would say on a team that you believe can compete next year and is not super shallow, I think he's absolutely worth that. Like I have him ranked above 2 base first by quite a wide margin. It's just really a matter of like, you're giving up a lot of value if you think your team might fall apart next year and you're looking at a top 2, top 3 pick, or a pick that you could realistically tank to the 101, and then you're giving that up. The 101 in 2027 is probably going to be worth not that much less than Malik Neighbors. So I think it's just about your confidence level and where those picks are going to fall. If you feel like you're a pretty strong playoff contender and the other one is, also not early, then sure, go trade from Malik Neighbors. He's an awesome wide receiver. He's going to bounce back. All right, guys, that is the Week 12 recap. Hope you guys get what you need tonight from the Panthers and the 49ers, as long as it's Ted McMillan points, because that's what I care about. I'll be back soon with another video. I think it's going to be Friday. I tried posting a video on Thanksgiving last year and nobody watched it. So Friday, I think, for a video this week. And I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. Spend some time with your families. Make sure you leave some time to tilt over your fantasy matchups as well. And I'll talk to you all very soon.